The Heir, A King's Duty, A Wife's Sacrifice. Episode 3. The Council's Ultimatum. 2 weeks later. The Grand Hall of Assembly pulsed with quiet tension. Golden light streamed from stained glass windows high above, casting fractured rainbows across the marble floor. Ministers and noble advisors took their seats along the curved table, murmurs bouncing off the domed ceiling as if the very walls sensed the impending confrontation. King Kael stood at the head, tall and composed, his crown catching the light with every subtle movement of his head. Tablets and digital documents cluttered the wooden table before him, but he barely glanced at them. This meeting wasn't about tariffs or trade routes. The silence in the hall already told him that. A silence too deliberate, too pregnant with unspoken demands. "And the Western ports have stabilized," Minister Duran reported, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "The merchant guilds are requesting armed escorts for the next trade cycle. Bandits have grown bold in the mountain passes." Kael gave a short nod. "Grant them for 2 cycles. Reassess after. Have Captain Merrick handle the assignments." An elder advisor, Lord Harlan, cleared his throat, one of those deliberate stage-setting coughs that never ended well. His weathered fingers traced the rim of his coffee cup, eyes never leaving the king's face. "And the matter of the heir, your highness." The room stilled. Every head turned. Styluses stopped moving across tablets. Even breathing seemed to pause. Kael didn't blink, though his fingers tensed almost imperceptibly against the arm of his chair. "What of it?" Lord Harlan offered a measured smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Only that 2 weeks have passed since your union. The people are hopeful. So is the council." He gestured vaguely toward the windows, toward the kingdom beyond. A child would assure them this alliance is more than symbolic. It would cement what words and treaties cannot. Kael allowed the silence to stretch, watching as the advisors shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. "We are aware of the expectations." "Is the princess unwell?" another advisor asked boldly. The Lady Meridian, whose family had served the crown for 7 generations. Her directness had always been both her strength and her downfall. Kael's gaze sharpened, cold as winter frost. "No." "Then has there been progress toward—" "No," he said, clipped and cold. "You may not ask. That line will not be crossed, not even by you, Lady Meridian." Minister Duran leaned forward, fingers steepled beneath his bearded chin. The silver in his hair caught the light as he tilted his head. "Forgive us, Highness, but your silence breeds speculation. If there are complications, the council must be prepared. The alliance with Evelyne's homeland is fragile at best. Her father watches from across the border, waiting for any sign of disrespect toward his daughter." Kael exhaled through his nose, the sound barely audible. He stepped forward, palms bracing the table, his royal signet ring clicking against the wood. "There are no complications. Only a woman navigating a life she never chose, in a palace that watches her like a hawk, waiting for her to stumble." His voice lowered, gaining intensity rather than volume. "Have any of you considered what it's like for her, torn from her home, her family, thrust into a marriage with a stranger, expected to bear his child before she's even learned the corridors of her new home?" The words hung in the air, heavy as storm clouds. "She is fulfilling every duty required of her," he said, voice like a drawn blade, "except the one that asks she surrender herself before she is ready. I will not be the man who demands that sacrifice before it's time." Uncomfortable glances, downcast eyes. No one dared speak, yet. "Do not mistake her patience for weakness," Kael said, his knuckles white against the table's edge. "Or mine. The patience of the realm is not as enduring as yours," Duran said, firmer now. He stood, meeting the king's gaze. "The nobles are beginning to murmur. 3 houses have already sent emails about alternative arrangements should this union prove fruitless. They question the strength of the union," Lady Meridian added, emboldened. "They ask if perhaps the princess is reluctant because she harbors loyalty to her father's ambitions rather than to her new kingdom." "If social media buzzes that the line cannot continue," began the young Lord Farron, newest to the council. Kael's jaw flexed. "You presume much." "We do what we must," Harlan said calmly, spreading his hands in a placating gesture. "As you do, as she must." The crown demands sacrifice from all who serve it, your highness, even from those who wear it. The queen and I are wed. The alliance is intact, Kael stated flatly. I signed the treaties in blood. Her father accepted the terms. But not yet fruitful, Durin pressed, his voice softer but no less insistent. And the realm grows uneasy. Whispers of war from the north grow louder each day. The people need assurance that the bloodline continues, that there will be stability after, should anything happen to you. A younger counselor spoke up, Lord Valen, whose family had always been more ambitious than loyal. Whispers rise, questions of compatibility, of whether the union was wise. Some say you've grown soft in your approach to the queen, that perhaps your heart overrules your duty. Kael's eyes turned to steel. Are you questioning my judgment, Lord Valen, or perhaps my resolve? Choose your next words carefully. No, sire, only appearances. Reassurance comes in the form of legacy, of lineage. Valen's smile was diplomatic but cold. The people respond to what they can see, a united front, a future secured. The flicker of fury in Kael's eyes could have set the table ablaze. His voice, when it came, was deceptively soft. I suggest, he said, deadly quiet, you tread carefully. What happens in the royal suite is not council business. With all due respect, your highness, Durin countered, when it concerns the succession, it becomes the business of the entire kingdom. Still, the pressure mounted like a wave building before it crashes. If you wish to hold this realm together, Durin continued, his tone almost apologetic but his eyes firm, then the people must believe an heir is coming. They must see that their sacrifices, the increased taxes for the wedding, the trade concessions to her father's kingdom, were not in vain. Perhaps the time frame would silence unrest, said Master Sebastian, the king's former tutor. His voice was calm, measured, more like that of a trusted peer than an elder. Give the nobles something to anticipate rather than fear. You're giving me a deadline? Kael's voice held dangerous calm, but his eyes betrayed him. Not just anger, but something deeper. A wounded pride, perhaps, or the knowledge that they were right, despite his resistance. We're giving the people peace of mind, Durin replied, not backing down. 1 month. After that, we must address questions directly, provide assurances, or consider contingencies. Kael repeated it, more to himself than them. 1 month. And if no heir is conceived by then, the young advisor Valen began, emboldened by the king's momentary vulnerability. Enough. Kael's voice thundered through the hall. The room flinched collectively, even Durin stepping back slightly. You forget who sits on this throne, who wears this crown. He straightened to his full height, shoulders squared. Who has led this kingdom through famine, through flood, through the 1,000-horse war when most of you cowered behind these very walls. And you forget the weight it carries, Durin replied, standing his ground despite the king's anger. Even kings must answer to history. Even kings must secure their legacy or watch it crumble. His voice softened. We serve you, Kael, but we also serve the crown. Sometimes those duties are not aligned. Kael said nothing more. He gathered the tablets, the digital files, each movement precise, controlled, though his fingers trembled almost imperceptibly with rage. Then he turned and walked out, his cloak snapping behind him like a battle flag. Lord Harlan's voice followed him, just loud enough to catch. He will see reason. He always does in the end. He didn't return to their private suite. He needed air, distance, a silence that wasn't full of judgment dressed in diplomacy. A moment where he wasn't King Kael, bearer of the sacred flame, protector of the realm, but simply a man caught between duty and decency. His boots echoed in the corridors until he found himself on the garden terrace, the sky overcast and bitter with early frost. The wind tore through his cloak, but Kael barely felt it. The cold was a blessing. It numbed the anger that burned beneath his skin. He braced his hands against the stone railing, his breath misting in the chill air. Below, the royal garden stretched out, once vibrant with summer flowers, now preparing for winter's sleep. Like everything else in this kingdom, dormant, waiting, vulnerable. 1 month. As if a child could be summoned on command. As if life were a tool of the crown to be wielded at will. As if Evelyne's body were state property, to be used when the council deemed necessary. He thought of her, the queen he hardly knew. Her guarded eyes, the careful way she held herself, not fragile, but armored. From the beginning, she hadn't refused him outright, but she hadn't welcomed him either. Every night she retreated behind a wall of polite distance, her shoulders tense whenever he entered their suite. And he had never forced it, had promised himself he wouldn't be that kind of king, that kind of man. Now, the council demanded he break that boundary, cross that line, become exactly what she feared he might be. But he would not be the man who took what she did not give. Not for the crown, not for the kingdom, not even for peace. Still, the pressure mounted, not just for the crown, for the alliance, for the realm that depended on him to keep the fragile peace. War whispers grew louder from the north. Her father's kingdom waited like a snake coiled to strike should the alliance fail. His realm. They didn't care if Evelyne was ready. They only cared that her womb belonged to the crown, that her body was a battlefield where kingdoms fought for dominance, for alliance, for security. And deep in his chest, that was the cut that bled the most. Because if she hated him for this, if she came to see him as one of them, not a husband, but a jailer, not a protector, but a user, if her eyes held contempt rather than the tentative trust they'd begun to build, he wasn't sure he'd ever forgive himself. "Your Highness." Kael turned at the voice. Sebastian stood there, his cloak drawn tight against the cold, but his stance as steady and familiar as ever. "You shouldn't be out in this chill," Kael said, not unkindly. "Neither should you," Sebastian replied, stepping up beside him. "But some things are best said where no walls can overhear." Kael didn't answer, his eyes locked on the frost-dusted gardens. "They push because they're afraid," Sebastian said, his tone quieter now. "Not just about succession, but about you." Kael scoffed. "They fear losing their grip, their influence." "That too," Sebastian allowed. "But it's more than that. I've seen you carry this kingdom on your back for years. You've given it everything. Your time, your freedom, your peace of mind." He bumped Kael lightly with his shoulder, the way he had since they were boys, sparring in the training yard. "They're afraid you'll give away your future too. For her." Kael's jaw clenched. "I don't need her to love me. I need her to trust me." "And how can she, if you won't even speak to her about this?" Kael turned toward him, eyes sharp. "What are you implying?" "I'm saying," Sebastian answered, voice calm but resolute, "hiding from the conversation won't make it disappear. The council has drawn their line. You either face this with her, or you face it alone." Kael looked away again, tension rippling through his posture. "And if she thinks I'm no different from the others, just another man trying to take what she's not ready to give, then at least she'll know it's you asking, not the council, not the crown, just you." Sebastian stepped back, eyes steady. "You've always been strong enough to fight for what matters. Don't let silence be the one thing that undoes everything." With that, he left Kael standing in the cold, surrounded by silence. And choices. He stood before their door longer than necessary, his hand hovering just shy of the handle. The intricate carvings beneath his fingers, vines and flames intertwined, symbols of their united houses, seemed to mock him with their harmony. She would know. They always knew. Word traveled faster than text messages in this place, and even silence had a way of whispering secrets between the stone walls. The council's demands would have reached her by now, carried by servants' whispers or a lady-in-waiting's concerned glance. Kael entered. She was seated by the window, knees drawn slightly inward beneath a thick velvet robe the color of midnight. A tablet open but untouched in her lap. Her hair was unbound, cascading over her shoulders in dark waves, a soft contrast to the hard expression she wore as she met his gaze. The electric light caught the gold thread in her robe, making her seem to shimmer like something otherworldly. He closed the door behind him. Didn't speak. Just looked at her. Really looked. At the shadows beneath her eyes. At the tension in her shoulders. At the way her fingers gripped the tablet too tightly, knuckles white with strain. "They gave you a deadline," Evelyne said. A statement, not a question. Her voice was calm, but underneath it, he heard something fragile. Something afraid. "Yes." His voice was low, rougher than he intended. He cleared his throat. "They did." She nodded slowly, as if confirming something she'd already guessed. "Of course they did." A bitter smile touched her lips. I wondered how long it would take. 2 weeks of marriage seems generous by royal standards. Kael crossed the room, not too close, but close enough that she'd feel the weight of his presence. He stopped at the edge of the fireplace, the flames casting long shadows behind him. 1 month, he said, to produce an heir. Or give reason why not? She gave a bitter, mirthless smile. And what would be an acceptable reason? That your bride can't seem to forget how little choice she had in all of this? That every time I close my eyes, I see my father's face as he signed me away to secure his borders? Her voice dropped almost to a whisper. That I still wake expecting to see my home, not these palace walls that feel like they're closing in? He flinched, not visibly, but inside it burned. Every word was a reminder of what this marriage truly was. A treaty written in flesh and blood, sealed with vows neither of them had freely chosen. I've never asked you to love me, he said, voice steady despite the ache in his chest. I've never expected it. No, she whispered, finally looking up at him. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. But you're asking for my body? That's still a part of me. Perhaps the only part I have left that's still mine to give or withhold. Silence stretched between them again, wider this time, heavier. The crackle of the fire seemed too loud in the stillness. Kael raked a hand through his hair, stepping back a pace. His crown sat on the table near the door where he'd placed it upon entering, and without it, he looked younger, more vulnerable. I told you I wouldn't touch you unless you asked. I meant that. And I'm not asking. The words landed like a blade to the gut. Not cruel, just final. An invisible line drawn between them. I'm trying to give you time, Evelyne, but they've given me none. He gestured toward the door, toward the palace beyond. They speak of duty, of legacy, of bloodlines. They talk about your womb as if it's a resource to be harvested at their convenience. Her eyes snapped to his, furious now. So what? You'll come to me like they ordered you to? Climb into this bed to perform your duty like a good little king? Will you force it, Kael? For them? For the kingdom? She stood abruptly, the tablet tumbling forgotten to the floor. Will you become everything I feared you might be when they first told me I was to marry you? He froze. Is that who you are? She challenged, her voice breaking on the last word. He took a step forward then, slow and deliberate. No. Gods, no. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, as if he was physically restraining himself. Do you think so little of me? After these weeks? Her breath caught. His voice shook, not with anger but restraint, with hurt. I will not force you, Kael said. But don't mistake that for weakness. Every part of me is screaming to end this war between what I want and what I swore I wouldn't take unless given. He stepped closer still, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Do you know what it's like to sleep beside you night after night? To feel the warmth of you just inches away? To want not just your body, but your trust, your smile, God's, even just a conversation that isn't edged with fear or resentment? He stared down at her, and for a moment the king faded. What remained was the man, tired, angry, scared in ways he refused to name. I don't want to do this like we're enemies. I don't want to hurt you. His voice softened, almost pleading. I want us to find a way forward that doesn't break either of us. Evelyne blinked, and for a breath, something softened in her. Her hand lifted, hesitating just short of touching his face, but only just. Then don't, she said. Don't come to me with council orders hanging off your shoulders like chains. Don't touch me to silence the court. Don't make me forget that you're a king first, and I'm a wife second. Her hand fell back to her side. I know what I am to this kingdom. A vessel, a bridge between warring lands, a womb to fill with the next generation of royalty. But I had hoped I might be something more to you. He didn't answer. Couldn't. The truth was too raw, too tender to voice, that he had begun to see her as more, that in quiet moments, watching her in the gardens, seeing her speak gently to the servants, catching her eyes in a crowded room, he had glimpsed the woman behind the title, and wanted her. Not the alliance, not the heir, her. She turned her face away, voice barely a whisper now. And don't ask when I'll be ready, because I don't know if I ever will be. Not like this. not with the weight of kingdoms pressing down on us, smothering any chance we might have had at something real. Kael let the silence settle, then gave a single nod. All right. He turned without another word. Wait, she called, her voice small but clear. What will you tell them? The council? They won't accept this answer. He paused at the door, hand on the handle. I'll tell them the truth, he said without turning, that I am not my father, that I will not take what isn't freely given, even for the sake of the crown. His shoulders straightened, resolve hardening his spine. And if they don't like it, they can find themselves another king. They'll never accept that, she whispered. You know they won't. Now he did turn, his eyes meeting hers across the room. Then they'll have to wait until we're ready, both of us. And this time he let the door close louder behind him, the sound echoing through the room like thunder before a storm. The fire had long died in the fireplace, but Evelyne hadn't moved from her seat. Her thoughts spun in endless circles, her stomach twisted with dread. The tablet she'd been pretending to read lay forgotten on the floor where it had fallen. Kael's words echoed in her mind. Both of us, as if they were truly partners in this, as if her voice mattered as much as his. Could it really be true? Or was it just another pretty lie, meant to soften her to his eventual demands? A knock startled her from her reverie, sharp and authoritative. Before she could respond, the door opened. A slender man entered, Lord Varric, older, with parchment-thin skin and a voice like silk pulled too tight. One of Kael's longest-standing advisors, and most ruthless, if the whispers were to be believed. My lady, he said, bowing slightly, forgive the intrusion at this late hour. I doubt you came for forgiveness, she murmured, making no move to rise. A flicker of a smile tugged at his lips. Indeed, I came to offer clarity on matters the king may be too tender-hearted to explain properly. Evelyne straightened, suddenly alert. On what? Your role. He folded his hands behind his back, moving deeper into the room as if he owned it. His eyes scanned the chamber, noting the single glass of wine on the table, the disturbed bed covers on only one side, evidence of the distance between royal husband and wife, and the urgency of your cooperation. Cooperation, she repeated, voice flat. She stood, unwilling to remain seated while he loomed above her. You mean submission. We allowed grace, Varric said, ignoring her comment. We respected your adjustment period, but the people grow restless. The noble houses murmur, whispers of infertility, of an alliance built on a barren womb. His eyes flicked meaningfully to her abdomen, then back to her face. Of a queen who refuses her most basic duty. Her stomach turned, but she kept her expression neutral. Is it a queen's duty to surrender her body before she's ready, before she even knows the man who claims to be her husband? It is a queen's duty to secure the line, he replied coldly, as it has been since the founding of this realm. Your discomfort is regrettable, but irrelevant in the face of necessity. And what does the king say to this? She challenged. Or does he not know you're here, threatening me in my own suite? They say the king is patient, too patient, that he has grown soft. Varric's smile was thin as a blade, that perhaps his heart has begun to rule his head, a dangerous weakness in these uncertain times. He is not soft, she said fiercely, surprising herself with her defense of the man she'd held at arm's length for weeks. He is honorable, something you wouldn't understand. No, Varric agreed. But what does it matter if the world begins to believe he is? If our enemies sense weakness in the crown? If your father, watching from across the border, begins to wonder if his son-in-law lacks the resolve to rule effectively? He took another step closer. How long before your father's armies test those borders again, believing they face a king too weak to respond? She stood, spine rigid. What exactly are you threatening? A legacy, he said coldly. Without an heir, the bloodline ends with Kael. Without a secured bloodline, certain families may begin to circle like wolves, eyeing the throne, even while Kael still sits upon it. He moved to the window, looking out at the kingdom sprawled below. Assassination attempts are not uncommon in times of succession crisis. I've personally thwarted 3 in my time serving the crown. Varric stepped closer. And if something were to happen to the king, say, in battle or by a mysterious illness, an heirless crown is ripe for war, chaos, blood. His voice dropped to a whisper. The streets running red while noble houses fight for control. Is that what you want? Do you wish to carry that responsibility? She swallowed hard, her throat suddenly dry. You can't possibly blame civil war on my reluctance. Can't I? He raised an eyebrow. History does. Queens who failed to provide heirs have watched kingdoms crumble. Look to the Western Isles, where Queen Morena's barren womb led to the Decade War that nearly destroyed her people. He stepped closer still. Or perhaps closer to home, your own grandmother, who was executed when she failed to produce a male heir after 3 daughters. Evelyne blanched, the blood draining from her face. It was true. Her father's mother had died that way, though the official record claimed illness. We need a child, Your Grace, he said softly. Not in 5 years. Not when you feel sufficiently wooed. Now, or the kingdom begins to fracture. This is not about you. It never was. This is about survival. And then, the final twist of the knife. If you truly care for him, you will do what is required before others take matters into their own hands. He left her standing in silence, the threat hanging in the air like poison. For hours, Evelyne paced, thought, remembered her father's cold eyes as he'd informed her of the marriage, remembered the servants' whispers back home about queens who failed their duty, remembered Kael's face as he'd left, tired, angry, hurt. If she refused, if war came because of her reluctance, how many would die? Would Kael die fighting to defend a kingdom weakened by succession fears? Would her own family be slaughtered if her father's ambitions led to invasion? That night, Evelyne bathed, let the maids dress her in silk the color of cream, soft against her skin. She dismissed them without explanation, ignoring their knowing looks, their whispered encouragement. Her hair was still damp when Kael returned, the tension on his face unmistakable. He stopped in the doorway, surprise evident in his eyes as he took in her appearance. The silk nightgown, the unbound hair, the bed turned down invitingly. "You're ready?" he asked, voice hesitant, cautious, disbelieving. "I am." She stood beside the bed, hands clasped to hide their trembling. He took a step closer, confusion furrowing his brow. "Why now? What changed in these few hours?" Her eyes flicked up to his, then away. She couldn't bear to see the hope there, knowing it was built on false pretenses. "I'm doing it for the people," she said softly. "For the realm, for you." It wasn't the answer he'd hoped for, and they both knew it. She watched as understanding dawned on his face, followed quickly by anger. Kael's expression darkened, his voice low. "Who came to you?" She didn't speak. Couldn't. "Evelyne," he said again, sharper this time. "Who came to you after I left? Who threatened you?" Still, silence. She turned away, unable to face him, unable to admit how easily she'd been manipulated, how deep her fears ran. His hands curled into fists, jaw clenched. Was it Varric? Harlan? "Tell me, and I swear by all the gods they'll never speak to you again." "It doesn't matter," she whispered. "What matters is that they're right. We need an heir. The kingdom needs stability." "You think this is what I want?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He gestured between them, to the bed, to her nightgown. To take what's not given? To call it duty and pretend that makes it right? To know that every time I touch you, you're thinking of obligation instead of desire? She reached out, her fingers trembling as they touched his arm. "Kael, please," her voice caught. "Don't make this harder than it already is." His gaze flickered to her, cold and distant, but she didn't let go. Her grip tightened. "I would have waited," he said, voice breaking, "as long as it took." "Don't leave," she begged, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm doing this for you, for us. I'm trying to do what's right, but I don't know how." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I don't know how to be a queen. I don't know how to be a wife. I only know that if I don't do this, people will suffer. You might suffer." Kael's eyes softened just a fraction, but only for a moment. The distance between them still felt like a chasm. He gently covered her hand with his own. "Don't say that," he muttered, brushing her hand off his arm gently. You don't owe me anything, Evelyne. Not your body, not even your loyalty, given how this marriage came to be. But I do, she whispered, almost pleading. I owe everything to this kingdom, to you, to us. She stepped closer, placing her palm against his chest, over his heart. War is coming, Kael. If I don't do this, if I let my heart decide over duty, it could fall on all of us. You might have to fight in that war, bleed in it, and her voice broke. I can't be the reason it starts. I can't be the reason you die. He stared at her, wounded and torn. And I can't be part of something that feels taken, not given, not like this. He covered her hand with his own where it rested against his chest. Not when I know it comes from fear, not choice. Sometimes fear is all we have, she whispered. Fear and duty. Isn't that what being royal means? No, he shook his head firmly. No, it can't be. There has to be more. There has to be. He trailed off, searching for a word that wouldn't come. Love, she supplied, a sad smile touching her lips. Is that what you were going to say? Trust, he corrected. There has to be trust at least. And this, he gestured to her nightgown, to the prepared bed. This isn't trust. This is surrender, and I won't accept it. She opened her mouth, but nothing came. The tears she'd been holding back spilled over, tracking silently down her cheeks. He gently pried her hand from his chest, but didn't let it go immediately. Instead, he pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles. Not passionate, but reverent, respectful. When you come to me, he said softly, I want it to be because you choose to, because something between us has changed, not because Varric or anyone else frightened you into submission. He released her hand. Until then, I'll handle the council. I'll handle the succession concerns. That's my burden to bear, not yours. And then he turned, this time not out of anger, but out of heartbreak, out of a refusal to take what fear had made her offer, and walked out, leaving her standing alone by the bed, the silk of her nightgown cold against her skin, her heart beating a confused rhythm of relief and loss and something else, something that felt dangerously like the beginning of respect, perhaps even affection. For the king who had refused what duty demanded he take. The crown still loomed ahead, its weight shifting with every passing moment.